There is a question we all ask at some point. Why me? Why this? Why now? Why if I have tried to do things right? Thousands of years ago, there was a man who asked that same question, not from comfort, from the ashes, from the deepest pain a human being can experience. His name was Job. And his story is not a fairy tale where everything goes well from the beginning. It is the most honest story about suffering that exists in the Bible, perhaps in all of human literature. Because Job was not a sinner being punished. He was, according to the Bible itself, the most upright man of his time. Job 1:1. And still, he lost everything. If you are in a moment where nothing makes sense, where you did everything right and things still went wrong, where God seems silent and the pain seems eternal, this story is for you. In a single day, Job lost everything. His children died. His livestock was destroyed. His servants were killed. Everything he had built over years disappeared in hours. And then came the illness. Painful sores from the soles of his feet to the top of his head. His own body became a battlefield. Job 2:7. His wife said to him, "Curse God and die." And Job said something that no one in that state should be able to say. Shall we accept good from God and not trouble? Job 2:10. He didn't say it because it didn't hurt. He said it because he believed in something greater than his pain. That is what real faith does. It doesn't eliminate the suffering. It gives you something to hold on to while the suffering is there. How many times have you lost so much in so little time that you didn't know where to begin to cry? Job would understand. After receiving the news, Job sat on the ground, 7 days and 7 nights, in silence, and his friends with him, without saying a word. Job 2:13. That is the most honest silence in all of the Bible. 7 days without answers, without explanations, without everything happens for a reason, just presence in the pain. And then Job spoke. And what he said was not a beautiful prayer. It was a cry. He cursed the day he was born. He asked why he existed. He cried out to God without receiving an answer. And God did not strike him down for it. Because God can handle your honesty. He can handle your anger. He can handle your unanswered questions. What he cannot do is pretend he doesn't see what you feel. The silence of God in suffering is not absence. It is the hardest presence to recognize. The one that doesn't speak, but also never leaves. How long have you been in that silence? 3 friends came to comfort Job, and at first they did it well. They sat with him. They kept silent. They were present. But when Job started to speak, they started to explain. They told him he must have sinned, that God doesn't punish the innocent, that if he was suffering, it was because he had done something wrong. Job 4:7. Who that was innocent has ever perished. And that is exactly the worst thing you can say to someone who is suffering, that their pain is their own fault, that if they had more faith, they would be better, that God wouldn't allow this if everything were right in their life. How many times have you heard that? Or how many times have you said it without realizing? Suffering doesn't always have a human explanation, and sometimes the person who most needs someone beside them is the one who least needs an explanation. They need presence, not theology. Job was right. His friends were wrong, and God himself said so in the end. Job said things that no correct Christian would say. He questioned God. He confronted him. He asked him to show up and explain himself. He said his suffering made no sense. He said he wanted to die, and God did not abandon him for it. On the contrary, when the moment came to speak, God addressed Job directly, not his friends who had given all the theologically correct arguments. Job, the one who had cried out, the one who had questioned, the one who had not been able to keep it together. Because God prefers your broken honesty to your perfect religiosity. Job 42:7. You have not spoken of me what is right as my servant Job has. God validated Job, not the ones who had the right answers. How many times have you stayed silent before God because you felt you couldn't say what you really felt? You can. He can handle it, and He hears you better when you are real than when you are perfect. After chapters and chapters of silence, God spoke, not from calm, from a whirlwind. Job 38:1. And what He said was not an explanation of Job's suffering. He didn't tell him why everything had happened. He didn't give him the answers Job had asked for. He asked questions. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Have you entered into the springs of the sea? Can you bind the Pleiades or loose the belt of Orion? These were not questions of mockery. They were questions of perspective, as if God were saying, Job, there are things I manage that you cannot even imagine. And if you trust me with those things, why can't you trust me with this? Job's suffering had no explanation because God's plan was too great to fit inside a human explanation. Sometimes the silence of God is not a lack of answer. It is that the answer is greater than any words could contain. There is a moment in Job's story that changes everything. It is not when God explains the suffering. It is when Job sees God. Job 42:5. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. That is the difference between knowing about God secondhand and truly encountering Him. Before the suffering, Job knew about God. After the suffering, Job knew God. There are things that can only be learned in the desert. There are depths of God that can only be discovered in pain. There is a faith that only comes to life when everything else has failed. It is not that God causes suffering to teach us. It is that in suffering, there is a door that in comfort never opens, a door towards something more real, more deep, more true than anything you would have found without going through it. The Job who came out of the suffering was not the same Job who went in. He was more, and you will be more too. God said something to Job's friends that should forever change the way we understand suffering. You have not spoken of me what is right, as my servant Job has. Job 42:7. The friends who had the perfect theological explanations were wrong. Job, who had cried out, questioned, and confronted, was right. Because Job's suffering was not punishment. It was not a consequence of sin. It was not a lack of faith. It was something that neither Job nor his friends could see from where they were standing. That should free you from an enormous burden. If you are suffering today, it is not necessarily because you have failed. It is not necessarily because God is angry with you. It is not necessarily because you lack faith. Sometimes suffering is simply part of living in a broken world. And God doesn't cause it, but He does redeem it. He always redeems it. At the end of Job's story, God restored everything, not the same. Double. Job 42:10. The Lord restored Job's fortunes when he prayed for his friends, and the Lord gave Job twice as much as he had before. More children, more livestock, more prosperity, more years of life. But there is something more important than the material things God restored. Job came out with a knowledge of God he didn't have before, with a faith that had been tested in fire and had survived, with a story that 3,000 years later still speaks to millions of people. His suffering was not in vain. Nothing he went through was wasted, and the same applies to you. What you are living through today, in the hands of God, is not wasted. Every tear, every sleepless night, every moment where you understood nothing, God is using it. And when the restoration comes, it will be more than what you lost. Job entered his story as a good man. He came out as a transformed man, not because the suffering was good, but because God is able to draw something extraordinary out of something devastating. There are things Job learned in the desert that he would never have learned in abundance. That God is greater than any theology can contain. That real faith is not the kind that never doubts. It is the kind that doubts and keeps going anyway. That suffering does not have the last word. That God does not abandon his own, even when he seems to be silent. And there is something more. Job learned that he didn't need the answers. He needed God. And when he truly found him, the questions stopped mattering as much. Because there is a peace that surpasses understanding. A peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. A peace that only comes from knowing that the God who holds the universe also holds you. That is what Job found, and that is what you can find too. If you are in your job chapter today, if you lost something you shouldn't have lost, if the pain has no explanation, if God seems silent and the days don't get better, if you are exhausted from fighting against your own mind, if the nights are long and the dawn takes too long to come, hear this. Your story has not reached chapter 42 yet. Job didn't know in chapter 3 what would happen in chapter 42. He couldn't see it. He couldn't imagine it. He could only keep going. And that is what you can do today too. You don't have to understand everything. You don't have to have perfect faith. You don't have to stop crying or stop asking questions. You just have to keep going. One more day, one more hour, one more step. Because the same God who restored Job already has your restoration prepared. Not the same as what you lost. Double. Your job story is not over. The best is still yet to come.